Jackie. I didn't know Jackie was offering this semester. So again, oh, hey, yeah, thank you for doing it. All right, let's get the kinks out. All right, here we go. Yeah, I had the mic off for the first 2 minutes. So we're on chapters 3. And what I just told my class that you didn't hear is this is where it starts to get real. This is where we're really going to start breaking down real estate theory. And we're starting the conversation at the top of page 34. And I just told my class, thinking I was telling you, that the word estate in the context of real estate theory is synonymous with 2 other words, estate, interest, and right. Estate, interest, and right. They all 3 mean the same thing. If I have an interest in property, that means I have some particular type of right to that property, which theory has decided to name that right or that interest some type of estate. And yes, they can. And here's where we're going to start using some old English words, 400 or 500 years old. Nobody knows what they mean, so it's a matter of getting comfortable with them, memorizing them. Hold on. Okay, so porch light can't hear. Hold on. Okay. So there's 2 opposites of each other. You weren't able to hear me, but I had asked class about a third of the way down, page 34. I'd like for you to highlight the words freehold estate. You see it in bold print. And at the top of page 35, the very first 3 words, a non-freehold estate. Highlight that. A non-freehold estate right there should be bolded. That might have been an accident by the publisher because they are the opposite of each other. If Carol has a freehold estate in 719 Panorama Trace, Carol owns the joint. So write owner in the left-hand margin and then point at freehold estate. But if Carol has a non-freehold estate in a particular property, she's a tenant. So you can write tenant right above non-freehold estate. See, if you were to look in the dictionary as to what the definition of a non-freehold estate, it is an interest in property based on a period of time. Is that not what a lease is? I'm here from June 1 to May 31 next year. So your interest is defined by a period of time, where if I own real estate, I have a perpetual interest in it. Look at your deed if you own real estate. There's no expiration date on it. It's yours until you die and leave it. Somebody in their will give it away or sell it. So we got 2 big weird words right out of the gate. Handled. Freehold estate means you own the joint. Non-freehold means you're a tenant. So now you got fee simple estate. Now, we casually talked about this last night, and I had my pencils for the illusion, for the symbolism, but this is my bundle of rights, the right to use, possess, exclude others, encumber, and dispose of. That'll come handy in just a second. Where I'm at is fee simple estate. Let's read together just the first sentence or 2. A fee simple estate or a fee simple absolute is the highest interest in real estate recognized by law. Now, when I was you, I heard my instructor say that 4 or 5 times the first couple of weeks. And I stayed late after class one night. And I was like, what in the hell is the highest interest in all of real estate? What do you mean by that? He said, first off, calm down, Lauren. Second of all, if someone is said to have a fee simple estate in a particular property, it just means they got all 5 of them sticks. I said, why didn't the hell you say that the first time you taught us? Now I understand it. I got all the rights that the government provides me as the owner of the property, the bundle of rights. Now, we know what the word fee means now. We know what the word simple means now, but it didn't mean that 400 years ago. So you've got to not try to make sense of the individual words relative to what you know they mean now, fair or unfair. So again, if Billy has a fee simple estate in 912 First Avenue South, he's got all 5 sticks in his hands. So I went home that night after staying late after class, smiling. I understood one thing. I'd been in class 2 weeks. I didn't understand anything until then. And yeah, I brought it up at the first ball game party. Do you know what the hell fee simple means? With my friends trying to show off, I now knew what something fancy meant. But the next week I was in class. Now the instructor's talking about fee simple absolute. I'm like, when did cocktails get involved? So the instructor told me after class, he said, Mark, fee simple absolute just means not only do you got all 5 sticks in your hands, but there are no restrictions, limitations of what you can or can't do with the property. Now, you're a big question mark right now. It's at this point I'm going to tell you, and some of you know this, most of you don't. I certainly didn't when I was taking this course. But an owner of real estate in America has the right to put a limitation or restriction on the deed that will affect future owners of the property. More often than not, what I'm referring to is called a deed condition. More often than not, deed conditions are used for practical purposes. You're really not going to find what I'm talking about in the manner that I'm talking about it on this page. And normally I am a paragraph by paragraph guy. Just bear with me for a second. Let me give you a for instance. Let's say I live out on rural Route 12. There's some rural routes in Alabama. There's only about a house every mile. And let's say I live in one of them houses on rural Route 12. And when I bought the house 20 years ago, I bought the acre on the right side of me and the acre on the left side of me, just to prevent somebody from, getting a little too cozy beside me, little buffers. Now my kids are 20 years old. They're wanting to go to college. And in church, I'm talking to Dolores in the pew behind me. We're waiting on preaching to get started. And I'm telling Dolores, I'm saying, I don't know how I'm going to get the kids started. I don't want them borrowing money. And me and the old lady didn't do great during their life, and we didn't put a lot away. And Dolores says, you own the acre on each side of you, dummy. Sell one of them. You'll have a little bit of money. And I went, oh, my God, why didn't I think of that? So I do. I sell one of the acres beside me. And guys, on a lot of these rural routes in the country, there ain't no zoning. So the guy that buys the acre beside me puts up a cinder block beer strip joint, where the minimum age stripper is 40. I'll be damned. I didn't see that coming. So I could have sold that property and put a condition on the deed that said this property would be used for residential purposes only. Kaboom. Isn't that a very practical way to take advantage of what I'm talking about? Yeah. Now, most conditions, if and when you ever see that one exists, they are very practical. But, to teach, I talk to people that I'm friends with in all other areas of real estate to get funny stories, to get examples, to have fodder for class. And I've done some research myself, and I've found weird deed conditions. I've seen a deed condition that say no structure on this property will ever be painted red. Strange. Maybe the cat was superstitious that lived there, in the past, but who knows? I've seen a condition say there'll never be a fence placed on this property. Strange. But as long as they don't break the law, they are legit. Now, some deed conditions can be perpetual, meant to exist indefinitely. Some deed conditions will be set to expire by the person that puts it on there. Like I may put, this deed condition will go away when my mama dies. or this condition will go away on March 31st, 2038. What have you? Or again, it could be a perpetual decondition. But anytime there is a decondition on a property, there's what the law calls possibility of, here it is. I'll just ask you to highlight it. Middle of the page, almost exactly in the middle of the page, page 35. You see italicized, 3 words, possibility of reverter. So if I put the decondition on the property, or let's say I pass away and one of my heirs, one of my relatives, discovers that someone's violating the condition that was put on the deed, and you end up as the owner of the property who's violating the condition in a court of law, if it's proven that you ignored or violated the limitation, restriction, they will pull it out from under you like a rug and give it back to the person that put the decondition on it in the first place, or their heirs if they're no longer alive. In other words, ownership will revert to the previous owner or the heirs of the previous owner. So I hope you already kind of figured out it's kind of serious. You don't want to go against the decondition. Now, sometimes there is a decondition. Well, that's where you see middle of the page. Fee simple defeasible, fee simple determinable. So let's start before I progress, and I'm not through with this subject. If Mark owns a property in fee simple, he's got all the 5 sticks in his hands. He has every right that the law says I have with the ownership of real estate. But then when you see fee simple absolute, that absolute's just icing on the cake, right? It's just a little gravy. Just means not only do I got the 5 sticks, nothing restricting, limiting, or defining what I can do with the property from the previous owners. It's like me finding a woman at my age with good credit. It's just icing on the cake. Only people that laugh at that joke is women. But y'all know I'm just kidding because I love women. But if Carol has a fee simple defeasible interest in a property, let the words talk to you. Carol's interest could be defeated if it's discovered that she ignored or violated any restriction or limitation. Remember we said the possibility of reverter? That's what I mean. Her interest could be defeated in a court of law. She could lose the property. The next one, fee simple determinable. Frankly, there is a small distinction between these two, but I don't think it's big enough to open a can of worms. As far as you're concerned, those are interchangeable. What if Angela has a fee simple determinable interest? It's the same damn thing. Angela's interest in the property is determined upon whether or not she honors the existing deconditions, limitations, or restrictions. So fee simple, 5 sticks. Fee simple absolute, no deconditions. Fee simple defeasible or determinable, deconditions. It's really that simple. Now let's continue talking about deconditions. We're going to talk about them again in just a couple of pages, so don't worry. Guys, I get feedback from students. We are not instructors. They do not let us near the exam site. They don't want us memorizing questions and bringing them to our students. So I get feedback from students who have gone to take the exam, and I try to hip you to what they tell me because the exam's fluid. You know, they'll focus on some subject matter for a couple of months, and then they'll go in another direction. It's all the same crap, you know, but they focus on some other parts of the subject matter and some other times. So I'm getting this feedback that there are a couple of questions on deconditions. One of them being on whether it's legal or not. All deconditions, spooky, weird, or not, or allowed or legal as long as they don't break the law. There's only been one decondition struck down by the courts, And it was a decondition from many years ago that said no Native American will ever occupy this property. That was discriminatory, therefore struck down. So I don't know how they pose it. Students don't come back and tell me word for word what the questions were. They just give me what they can recall. So I tell you what they tell me. So deconditions are legit, long as they don't break the law. Also, the examples I've been giving you had to do with the tangible property, like no fence on the property, must be used for residential purposes. It doesn't have to always have to have something to do with the property. Gosh, I'm so fortunate this happened because it's given me this bit to use at this point in this class while I've been teaching. About a year and a half ago, a woman called me and she said, Mr. Yarber, you don't know me, but I have been told that you could help me with a real estate situation I'm involved in. And guys, the minute you start teaching pre-license, now you're a damn expert. And I ain't no expert. But I said, ma'am, you took the time to call me. I'm no expert, but since we're on the phone, what you got? I'll see if I can help you. So she said her pops had passed away about a year before, and he had left his home to her. And in the phone call, she said, it's been in probate for a year, Mr. Yarber. And she said, I find out today from my attorney that Dad put a decondition on the deed that the title will remain in my name as long as I remain an unmarried woman. And she said, that's not fair. I said, I don't know what kind of damn world you grew up in. I didn't grow up in a fair world, but I said, it ain't got nothing to do with fairness. But I felt the need to ask some more questions to figure out why the decondition. Turns out she'd been married and divorced 6 times. This was her father's way of stopping the damn cycle. You know what I mean? It's what pops are there for sometimes, I said, life's about choices. It ain't about fairness. I said, you either stay unmarried and enjoy the property or live in sin and go straight to hell. It's your choice. Oh, I'm playing, man. Just playing. But the point is that is a decondition that had nothing to do with the tangible property. Just had to do with her remaining an unmarried woman. Very unusual, but it's always given me that in class. I like telling that story. Also, here we go. Another thing, feedback I've gotten from students. Sides of town change over time. In the 60s, this might have been a residential area. Now you go there, shopping centers, convenience stores, there's a school, or vice versa. 40 years ago, there might have been a library, a school, a convenience store. Now there's a damn subdivision. Things change. So what if my grandpappy in 1958 sold a property, put a decondition on it that this property will forever be used for residential purposes only. But now here it is 40 years later, and you know what it ain't? It ain't a residential area anymore. It's a commercial area. And from what I understand, the question is asking you, the student, what takes precedence, zoning or the decondition? The decondition. So you know what you can do with that property? Not a damn thing. Maybe pull a truck up on Halloween and sell pumpkins. Maybe sell firewood out of the back of a pickup truck. But the zoning takes a back seat to the decondition. Now, if you discover that a decondition exists and you want the property and that decondition is going to prevent you or hinder you from doing what you're wanting to do with the property, you would have to seek out the person who put the decondition on or the heirs of the person. There are attorneys that might help with that. And get quitclaim deeds from all of them, okay? Because when they give you a quitclaim deed, they're giving you whatever interest they have in the property. And just because my grandpappy put a decondition on a property 60 years ago, I have an interest in that property. It's not an interest of possession. I can't rent it out. I can't got no tax benefits. But my grandpappy, by virtue of our relationship, is limiting what people can do with that property. That means I have an interest. And for that interest to be removed would be putting my interest on a quitclaim plate and giving it to you. I met a man who's an older man. My mentors are all 80 and retiring now, because I came into the business 23, 24, and I hung out with 50-year-old dudes. I mean, I met them for breakfast. I went for beers because they know the ropes. They know all the tricks. They know the shortcuts. Oh, my gosh. Why am I going off on that damn rabbit trail? What was I talking about? Son of a gun. Oh, my God. I was talking about, yeah. So I was talking to an older gentleman about 20 years ago, and he was telling me about a situation in Centerpoint when he was trying to sell property to an investor who wanted to put a strip shopping center. Not a strip shopping center, a legitimate L shopping center. You know, the grocery store and drugstore are usually the anchors in a shopping center. And they did a title preliminary search, and they discovered a deed condition. And the deed condition said that this property will never be used for the manufacture, wholesale, or distribution of alcohol. This was a common condition that came about during what period? Prohibition. So it had been 50 years prior. So the man told me, he said, Mark, believe it or not, my attorney, his hobby was putting together family trees, or what do they call, where you put together they order it online now, Can you imagine how hard that job would have been before the internet, for crying out loud? Anyway, he said, Mark, we found 17 heirs of the man that put that deed condition on, spread out through the country. And we had to get quitclaim deeds from all 17 of them before we could advance. Because Winn-Dixie ain't going to set up where they can't sell beer and wine. So that was a deed condition that was going to prevent them from doing what they wanted to do with the property. So we just talked about a lot, got a lot covered on that. All deed conditions are legit as long as they don't break the law. And in the instance where you got a zoning conflict and the deed condition wins that battle, takes precedence over zoning. And we kind of nailed freehold and non-freehold estate. Let's continue moving to page 36. Now, I'm going to talk about a life estate. A life estate is not rare, but it's not common. And typically, if you see life estates, they're kind of in the family. Let me give you an example before you start reading. Let's say my grandmother. She's 76. She calls me up on the phone one day and she said, Mark, I think I want to move in that retirement community across town. She said, y'all don't call me. Y'all don't come see me, and I'm getting a little lonely. I'd like the social aspects. And it kind of hurt my feelings. I said, I understand, Grandma. So we put her in the retirement community, not a nursing home. She was still in a retirement community. But 2 years later, she calls me up and says, get me the hell out of here. I don't know if y'all know anything about retirement communities. Y'all women carry that click crap to the damn grave. She said, Mark, there's 5 tables I can't sit at for lunch in the lunchroom. I don't get invited to certain rooms. She said, get me out of there. You still got my house. I said, yeah, I do, Grandma. She said, you're going to deed it back to me, right, son? And I said, yes, Grandma. So I deed my grandma a life estate. Again, pay attention to me. The words will confuse you right now. I deed her a life estate, meaning I want to determine where the property is going to go after she passes. I don't want her to determine it. Now, anytime I deed someone a life estate, the law says I must pull back an estate. And I have 2 choices of what to pull back. I could deed my grandmother a life estate, meaning she now owns the property, but only for her life. And then I deed myself an estate in reversion. Listen to the words, reversion. When my grandmother passes, it's going to revert back to me. Or, maybe I'm eyeballing my grandmother. She got about 8 good years left on her. And let's say my daughter's 12. What would she be in 8 years? Damn. She'd be 20. My God, a bunch of zombies in my class. Wake the hell up, man. Drink you an energy drink before you come to class tomorrow night. I don't even remember what I was talking about. Who? Yeah. But that one was easy to understand. Life estate to grandma, me estate and reversion, right? That's easy. But I used my daughter in that last one. I'm going to call my daughter, for example purposes, a remainderman. I'm going to deed her an estate and remainder. So when my grandmother passes, it don't go to me. It goes to my daughter or my daughter's heirs if she's no longer. So I'm going to repeat. I deed someone a life estate. I must pull back a deed. I've got two choices: an estate in reversion. You see these at the bottom of the page, or estate in remainder. Now keep paying attention to me. I ain't through. First of all, let's do this. Highlight the first sentence under the term life estate. That is the definition. What you're highlighting says a life estate is a freehold estate. We now know what freehold means, don't we? Ownership. Limited in duration to either the life of the holder of the estate or the life of some other designated person. You see where it says, or some other designated person. I could deed my grandmother a life estate, but base it on the life of my aunt. Okay. My uncle, my cousin. Again, a lot of life estates more often than not are used inside families to keep it in the family, so to speak. But look at the third paragraph. I highlight the first sentence. The holder of a life estate is called a life tenant. Now, it's at this point I want to explain to you that just because society has told us to call a renter a tenant does not mean that's all a tenant is. A tenant is someone who has an estate or an interest or a right. And don't get me wrong, when you're a renter, do you have the right? I have a right of possession, yeah. But a tenant is not just a renter. A tenant could be many things. So don't get hooked on the word tenant and think renter. Now, let me see if I can just find something. Okay, they don't have it for you to highlight. So in the left-hand margin, right to the left of that paragraph where it says the holder of a life estate is called a life tenant, put life tenant cannot commit waste. I'll explain that. That's a legal term. Life tenant cannot commit waste. To commit waste is to significantly alter or destroy the property. Why can my grandmother not commit waste? Because somebody got a future interest. If I got an estate in reversion, don't be jacking up my future interest, Grandma. You see what I'm saying? Now, that's why she can't commit waste. Because somebody got a future interest in the property. Now, could a life tenant, just based on your little brief knowledge, could they will it to somebody in their life that they love? I'll be damned. No. When they die, it's going to go to the estate in reversion or the person who has the estate in remainder. Now, do you see why repetition is important? Y'all forgot that in 32 seconds. I'm just trying to impress upon you why repetition is so important. Man, y'all, when I was on y'all's side, I fought with this. It's so fun to be on this side now. But I ain't through with this. So, life estate, I gave you an example, my grandmother. Told you she can't commit waste. We said that was legal terminology for can't significantly alter or destroy the property. Reminded you that she can't will it. That would be anti-life estate if she could. But pure attribute, right there below the 3 paragraphs of life estate, highlight the first sentence. A life estate may also be based on the lifetime of a person other than the life tenant. Again, a lot of this is in families. You know, when grandma or when my cousin Colleen dies, you know, then it'll go to my nephew, and then when he dies, it'll go. You know, it's just families kind of keeping it in the family. Now check this out. My grandmother, in my example, being a life tenant, she has all of the normal privileges and responsibilities that come with home ownership, with those two exceptions. She can't will it, and she can't commit waste. But everything else she can do. So 2 months after I deed my grandmother a life estate, could she sell the property to a dear friend? I'll be damned. I just said, with the exception of those two things, she has all of the normal privileges. I'm really busting y'all's kahoonies tonight. She has this is how you got to think through these questions. She has all of the normal privileges and responsibilities of home ownership. But check it out. Let's say 2 months later, my grandmother sells it to a friend of hers. And then a month later, my grandmother dies. Well, guess what? The woman she sold the property to's interest is over, because her interest was based on my grandmother's interest. Or whoever's got the estate and reversion or the estate and remainder. Very good. Now, the thinking here is my grandmother cannot sell what she don't own. And if she doesn't own anything beyond her life, that's what the person purchasing it from her is getting. Nothing beyond her life. Now, let's say it's not in the family. Let's say I find me a house in Denver, Colorado, and I'm just pulling that out of my fanny. Denver, Colorado, and it is the house that mysteriously me and my wife have dreamed about. We have described. We have drawn it out on paper. We said, there's no way that house exists in real life. And son of a gun if we find it. And we go to the owner, and the owner says, but I'm only going to sell a life estate. I'm fine. I don't care. Now, I kiddingly say this, but I kind of not kiddingly say it. But I've told both my daughters, don't plan on getting a nickel from me after I die. I said, don't let a doctor tell me I got stage 4, because the pace at which I'm spending money will just increase. You know, my intent's to go out pitiless. I could care less what happens to a property. If I want to buy that property, they'll say, and beggars can't be choosers. And the guy says, but I'm only selling a life estate. If I want to have it for my life, when my heart stops beating, I could care less. Could be that. You know, beggars can't be choosers. Not a family situation, but maybe this has been in that man's family, you know, and he's got somebody for it to go to. Like I said, life estate. They're not rare, but they're not common. But we went over the handles, enough to help you get a question right on the exam. But you know what the booger is, y'all? Oh my gosh, is you can understand the material, but yet get the question wrong. And that's why I emphasized last night the importance of taking practice quizzes often to get your brain comfortable with how the nerds word things. You'll get used to not letting this word catch you or missing this word. Over here on page 37. When they put the word legal in front of life estate, they're not even talking about what I just spent 15 minutes talking about. The legal life estate, first of all, in the first paragraph, they mentioned dower and courtesy. Those are extinct concepts. You know, used to, you know, I would encourage a woman to marry my son, you know, or vice versa. I'll give you 5 cows, 2 mules, and a horse. That was kind of dower and courtesy. But homestead still exists. And if you own a home right now, you have filed for your homestead exemption because it cuts your property taxes in half. Now, what is the homestead exemption? Well, guys, 200 years ago, we lived a different world than we live in now. And women, everybody was poor and worked hard, and women had 10, 11, 12 kids because you had to have somebody in the fields working, cleaning clothes, cooking. I mean, what a life they lived. God, I would be the biggest pansy. And the man would die, leaving the woman with no marketable skills and 12 youngins penniless and homeless because the creditors would come take it. So the courts had to think, they couldn't protect it. So what I want you to know about the Homestead Act, if you filed for it, if you own a home, you did. If you filed for it, it does not protect creditors from taking your home. It just means if the creditors take your home and sell it, they've got to give you a little bit of the money, like $5,000 in one instance and $6,000 in another. Just some seed money for you to get started again. You know, put a deposit on something maybe. That's the thought behind the homestead. Here's what I want you to know on the exam. The homestead protects home. I'll talk slowly. It's not a long definition, about 6 words. Protects home from unsecured creditors. In case you don't know what unsecured means, I'm going to explain that real quickly. Protects home from unsecured creditors. Guys, when you have a secured loan, that means it's collateralized. That means you gave the lender something of equal value of yours, and they're going to hold it hostage until you pay the loan back. An unsecured loan means it is not secured by collateral. And I think of those payday loans. Y'all, when I was in the Army, broke and got out of the Army, broke, and I'd get in a pinch and need $400, and I'd go to American General, and I don't even know if they still exist, and I'd get me a little $500, 38% interest loan. That's an unsecured loan. And the Homestead Act would have prevented American General, that was the name of the company, I don't know why I still remember, from coming to get my house. Okay? So that's really all I want you to know. All I hear is on the exam. Homestead Act protects your home from unsecured creditors. So let's turn the page, and we're going to revisit something that we started talking about last night, and that is encumbrances. And we now know, I'll remind you, an encumbrance is anything that negatively affects the owner's rights to his own property. We talked about a lease being an encumbrance. Why? That means I can't possess what I own. We talked about a lien being an encumbrance. You know, if I don't make my payments, they're going to take it. Anything that is negative to the owner is an encumbrance. So you see liens right there. Private restrictions. You know, we just been talking about conditions, didn't we? Deed conditions. If you are telling me there's things I can't do with my property, that's hindering my own rights. So that's negative. But you see CC&R says covenants. I'm down toward the bottom of page 38. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions, parentheses, you see CC&R. A minute ago, gang, we talked about deed conditions. Now, let's talk about deed conditions, first cousin, covenants. Now, to talk about covenants. Last night, I introduced a word to you, homogeneous. When a developer buys 80 acres, and his intent is to put a subdivision through here, do you think that developer can afford to trust that the purchasers of those individual lots understand this homogeneous theory? No. I remember as a kid asking my dad one time, Dad, how come all the houses in a subdivision are pretty much the same house, just slight differences? I think he said, shut up and get in the yard. That's back when we were forced to play in the yard. But as an adult, I followed up on that, and I found out that in order to have stable value, you got to have homogeneity. Everything's got to be similar. Imagine a neighborhood with an A-frame house that's worth $48,000 and a $2 million house and a weird house falling in on itself and a round house. You wouldn't be able to ascertain the value of anything, you know. So since the developer can't afford to trust that the purchasers of those lots understand this, the developer has to put covenants on the deed that define, restrict, or limit what the people that live on that property can or can't do. Now, half the covenants are usually redundant of zoning. They reestablish setbacks, sidelines, minimum square footage that might exist in that area. And then the other covenants are usually meant to protect neighbors from other neighbors doing crazy, wacky things with their property. You ever notice in some subdivisions, typically 20 years or newer, that everybody's got the same kind of mailbox? That's not a coincidence. There's a covenant. But you go to some older neighborhoods where that wasn't a common covenant, and you'll see a big brick mailbox, and you'll see the old lady with a birdhouse mailbox and football coach with a beat-up Walmart still because the kids are hitting it with the bats. Everybody got different. Common covenant is you can't put a secondary structure in your backyard. And that's to prevent people from building unsightly sheds to hold their tools. Now, some neighborhoods will allow you to build a secondary structure in the backyard, but it has to appear as the home. So if you have a brick home, same brick, same color roof tiles. But these are just examples. And, now the HOAs are going crazy over the last 15 years. You know why? Because homeowners used to be on the board of the HOA. And we started turning it over to third parties. And when you're a homeowner, I don't want to burn bridges. Y'all my neighbors. People are nicer to each other. But when you're a third party and I don't live in that neighborhood, I could give a damn. I'm going to write you a scathing letter. Notice your damn garbage can was out in the driveway for 10 minutes too long. It's ridiculous. But covenants are enforced by the HOA. So if I violate a covenant and I don't respond, I'm not going to lose my property. That went with a D condition, the possibility of reverter. That went with a D condition. The worst the HOA can do is sue me, and I might be fined and forced to rectify whatever the problem is. But that's better than losing the damn property. Nevertheless, that's why you always see them discussed in the same covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Okay, the bottom of page 38, you see easements and highlight the first sentence. Usually the first sentence of a concept is a good definition. An easement is the right to use the land of another for a particular purpose. More often than not, gang, this is for the purpose of getting to and from a road. The courts have said within reason everybody is entitled to a right to get to a road. But there can be unique situations. I'll show you one. Here's a road. Here's a big old piece of property. My uncle owns this piece, and he died and left it to me. And if I don't own a helicopter, I'm going to have to trespass to get to the road. So maybe I go to the owner that owns this big property that surrounds me, that's keeping me landlocked. And I describe my dilemma. And my owner says, oh, yeah, I see, Mark. Let's go downtown. We'll have lunch at my favorite sandwich shop. And then we'll go by my attorney's office, and I'll deed you an easement, giving you permission to cross my property. I'll let you cut some ruts right there along the edge of the property, and you can get to the road. Well, hey, problem solved, and I got me a new friend. But what if I go knock on my neighbor's door and I tell him that story? I tell him my situation. He says, come hell or high water, son, will you cross my property? Well, the law says, within reason, I'm entitled to a right to get to the road. And I don't want to open a can of worms up, but the law says I would have to take the neighbor that offered me the shortest and most direct route to the road, and I could only have an easement of 30 feet or what, a lot of particulars. But I go to court, and the judge would end up telling the dude that owns all this property, sorry that you weren't cooperative, but I'm going to have to deed mark an easement to cross your property. So let's look up at the top of page 39. You even see an illustration. Lot B, let's say that those trees are, thick woods. So maybe he went to his neighbor, explained his dilemma. His neighbor said, yeah, you can cut some ruts across my property. Problem solved. Maybe he said, boy, you ain't crossing my property. That's old curmudgeons. They get like that. I got to take them to court, and then I get the easement. However, I'm going to get it, either the owner cooperating or me going to court. But look here. You're seeing it now called an easement appurtenant. I described the word appurtenant to you last night. I don't expect you to memorize everything I say, so I'll remind you. Anytime you see the word appurtenant, it means it's attached to. So this easement is now attached to the land. So if the owner of lot B sold it to somebody else, the new owner don't have to negotiate an easement. It is attached. It went with it. And when lot A sells his property to somebody, the new owner can't prevent the people from lot B from crossing. The easement is appurtenant. It belongs to, it is attached to the land forever. Now, in the lot A box, I want you to write the word servient. And in the lot B box somewhere, write the word dominant. They tell you somewhere, oh yeah, right above the paragraph, you see this discussed in italics. The guy that owns the property that the easement has to cross is said to be a servient tenement. It's a tenement. Tenement is a weird word that we don't use in the South. They use it in the Northeast a lot. Tenement, I'm not really sure what it means. But lot B is said to be the dominant. So here's the thing. When I was you and I was preparing to take this exam, I told myself, I said, gee whiz, I'm going to forget which one is which. It's going to be a quarter flip at the exam site. And guys, it would blow y'all's mind if you knew how many people made 69. Come this close. And I thought, gee whiz, I don't want that one. So I thought to myself, is the owner of lot A serving a need that the owner of lot B has by allowing him to cross his property? Well, I'm really not asking you. I'm just telling you my little memory tool. So lot A is serving a need that lot B has, and that is to cross lot A's road. So that was a way I was not going to miss that quarter flip question and make a 69 and that be the dadgum question. It kept me from the promise. The bottom of page 39, you see an easement in gross. You can go ahead and highlight that in the first sentence. As soon as you do highlight it, turn the page, you'll see an illustration. You see those power lines running down through there? That is a gross easement or an easement in gross, either or. Gross easement and gross. This is a utility easement. So now, easement by necessity. We're in the middle of page 40. Let's go back to the exam. I'm glad I kept that up here. I then screwed it up though. The road again. Let's say I own that piece of property. And for whatever reason, I subdivide this one piece of dirt and cut it out. And I sell it to you. I created your landlocked. Do you see that? You didn't buy into a landlocked situation. I created the landlocked situation. I put you in the landlocked situation. Therefore, the law says I have to give you an easement. So an easement would be included with the purchase. I created the need by selling you landlocked property. Need being the root of necessity. Need being the root word for necessity. No, it's not. Necessary is the root word of necessity. But nevertheless, easement by necessity. And you'll notice within that paragraph, italicized, you see ingress and egress. You know, again, I say nerds a lot, y'all. I got family and friends that are nerds, and I'm a little jealous of nerds. I'm not being ugly. But why couldn't they just say enter and exit? Why do they got to come up with ingress and egress? I get some words having a more official word, but Enter and exit's been cool for a long time. But the other big point being, there could be a question where you need to know which one is ingress. Is that entering or exit? I kind of remembered in for enter. I'm going in, Bottom of page 40, easement by prescription. So what we're going to do is I want you to kind of put a holder here, and you got a bookmark in your folder, or you can just use your pen, and turn to page 93. I want to talk about something else and then come back to page 40. Okay, so on 93, I'm just flipping over here for a brief second to explain something. So you don't have to take notes on this page right here because we're definitely going to cover it later. But adverse possession, you may have heard squatter's rights. Squatter's rights is a nickname for acquiring title by adverse possession. Adverse possession used to happen more often 200 years ago than it does today. But a squatter could be living on your property for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're just living there because it's been abandoned and they're going to live there until the owner comes and kicks them out. Or maybe they were sold the property by a crook who forged some documents that made it look like they were the owner and they were buying it from the owner. Regardless of whether it was a mistake or purposeful, let's say that you discover a squatter on your property and you get all uppity and try to get them off. You get upset and you start cursing, get off my property. You find yourself in a court of law. If they can, I turned away from 93. If they can prove to the court, look at those 5 bullets, that they've been there. Now, every state has a period of time that goes with those 5 bullets. You don't need to know this, so don't write it down, but Alabama's period of time is 20 years. If the squatter can prove that they've been in that squatting on that property for 20 years or longer in Alabama, you don't need to know the 20 years. I'm just referencing that because it's Alabama. But I've been there judge. I've been there open, notorious, continuous, hostile, and adverse. If you want to know what those words are, look to the right. The judge is going to look at the owner of the property and say, I'm sorry, sir, this squatter has just acquired title to your property. If they can meet that criteria, a squatter will acquire title to property that they don't even know. They do now. Here is what I crack up on this page. Look above the 5 bullets. The nerds were nice enough to put together a little acronym, ANCA. How could the nerds not see Nacho? Nacho. So I would, Nacho, notorious, adverse, continuous, hostile, and open. It's not your land anymore. I mean, that just, nerds don't think like that. Turn back to page 40. Easement by prescription is a first cousin of adverse possession. Let's say that my granddaddy died and left me a property when I was 5 years old. Now, I didn't have a job at 5. So my parents paid the property taxes on this property until I became an adult. And then at 19, they was like, you got to assume responsibility on this property, Mark. Your uncle died and left you when you was 5. We've been footing the bill. And maybe it's in the woods. It's not even developed property, and it's in Southwest Georgia. And I tell my wife, I say, let's go look at that piece of property now that I'm grown. Let's go look at it. Hell, we might want to move there. Let's set up a little getaway from Birmingham, who knows. So we drive to Southwest Georgia. We get out. We don't see a squatter, but we see ruts running across our property. And I look at my wife and I say, apparently, over the years, people have discovered a shortcut heading to somewhere. And coincidentally, here comes a truck. So I get out in the middle of the ruts, stop the truck. Guy's rolling down the window. And I walk up and I say, hey, hey, neighbor. this is my property. You drive it across. I'm not trying to be a big old a-hole or nothing, but, this is the first time I've seen this property. Me and the wife like it. We're going to come here and claim it, build us a house. And he's looking at you like that's the craziest thing he's ever heard because he's been driving this route many years. So you fast forward to a court of law, the same criteria, the nacho, but they're not proving they've been occupying it. They're just wanting to prove to the judge they've been driving across it for that period of time. The judge wouldn't give them title. That's what people with adverse possession get. They actually get a deed. These people are just going to get the permanent right to continue crossing my property. And that is called an easement by prescription. So one squatter, you acquire ownership, by gosh. But that's because you've been occupying it. Here, you've just been using it. You can even put page 93 in the left-hand margin right there. So when you're in this book studying, you can recall me flipping back. What if I own property and that's undeveloped and I got me an 8-acre pond on it? And me and my friend go fishing. We catch a man and his son fishing. And I say, I don't mean to be an a-hole, but I can't allow you to fish on my property without my permission. And he's looking at me like I'm crazy. He said, me and my boy have been fishing here for 21 years. That man could acquire the permanent right to continue fishing my pond. So that's why you see people selling fishing licenses and hunting licenses. Now, the license is just revenue for the government. But if I own private property, I can put a phone number for you to call me and get a hunting license to hunt on my property. Because if you remember on page 93, one of the criteria was without the true owner's consent, hostile. If I sell you a license, am I giving you consent? Yeah, so I'm not letting that period of time evolve to where you could eventually claim title. So a license is permission, which prevents the period of time from forming. And the beauty of a license is it's revocable permission. But for this very reason, this one isolated reason, you will have one question on your exam about a license. And we see there, it's a personal privilege to enter the land of another for a specific purpose. I used hunting and fishing as an example. An encroachment is self-explanatory. An encroachment is where somebody built over onto your property. Fence, the structure itself, driveway, etc. We'll be back on page 42 when we come back from break. Guys, I got, let me put the expiration time for the break. I got 7:02, so let's break till 7:15. That gives you a 13-minute break. You've been working today, some of you, so it gives you a chance to loosen up. We'll see you back here in a bit. Boy, Rudy's DNA must be very strong. Is his child through Brittany? Well, he's got two now through.
Yeah.
Is the first little boy going to end up looking like you and your daddy? Oh, he's not. So Brittany's DNA in there?
No, because they're both of them. My sister's gonna be like 5 foot, and my brother's gonna be like 5'7".
The doctor's already.
Yeah,
they can figure that out early.
I'm supposed to be 6'3". So my dad's 5'7". My stepmom's 5'3". So
How tall are you?
I'm 6'1.5".
Are you really?
Yeah.
But your dad's jealous. Oh, I bet he hates it. All right, here we go. I got an open mic, so everybody's hearing everything I'm saying. All right, top of page 42, gang. Let's truck along. I am not going to talk about Liz Pendens right here. I think it's misplaced. It's out of. It's in the wrong chapter. It's in another chapter in its proper place. That's where I'm going to talk about it. I think the guy that wrote this book has ADHD worse than I do. It'll just out of nowhere, he'll have a flow of thought and then just boom, put some random crap. So don't worry about me skipping Liz Pendens right now. You can always read the first sentence. That tells you right there, but that's not what I want to focus on right now. Moving down, government powers. So, gang, we have discussed that me and you as Americans have certain inherent rights that come with ownership of real estate. We call that our bundle of rights. You have the right to use, possess, exclude others, encumber, and dispose. But our bundle of rights are subject to restrictions. Now, you don't necessarily have to write down what I'm doing. You could be the student you want to be. Take notes how you want. I'm just saying sometimes I put what I'm saying so you can look at it and take a picture of it, a mental picture, if you will. Restrictions. You've got public restrictions and you got private restrictions. Private restrictions are the C, and R that we've been talking about, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Public restrictions are called police powers. It's right there in the middle of page 42. A police is not someone in a uniform. Police is a generic word that means government authority. So police powers are specifically zoning and building codes. Those are the police powers that our personal bundle of rights are subject to. So if we build a structure, we got to meet code and we've got to obey zoning ordinances. So if it's a commercial side of town, don't build a home and live in it, or vice versa. Don't grow a crop in an industrially zoned part of town. Don't put a smokestack manufacturing plant in an agrarian part of the state, where we're growing stuff, agriculture. So again, public restrictions, police powers are either zoning or building codes. But now find yourself in the middle of page 42 where it says police power. And let's read for just a second. Every state has the power to enact legislation, to preserve order, protect the public health and safety, and promote the general welfare of its citizens. This authority is known as the state's police power. I want you to highlight the next sentence. The state's authority is passed on to municipalities and counties through enabling acts. So here's the point of that statement that you just highlighted. We've got a lot of cities listening to us. We got Dothan, Mobile, Saraland. I don't know. I'm in the city of Vestavia. Vestavia did not have blanket authority to come up with their own zoning and building codes. They had to be given that authority from the state of Alabama. And that authority was given to them through the enabling acts. Guys, I would not be harping on something like I am unless I knew it was on the exam. So the state gives municipalities the authority to come up with their own police powers through the enabling acts. Another governmental power. Zoning and building codes, but you also got eminent domain. It's at the bottom of the page, but I'll put it on the whiteboard. It's hard to write with a mouse. Eminent domain, let's talk about it. First of all highlight that whole paragraph on page 42, not up at the top of page 43, just those 3 lines. Dear, what's your name on the end? Do you have a highlighter? Okay. I didn't see you using one. I don't care what you do. I just wanted to give you one if you didn't have one. Guys, anytime me and you are driving down roads, whether it's an interstate, state highway, or just a road from get to here to wherever, we're driving over what used to be something else. You're driving on the interstate. There used to be shopping centers under that concrete. There used to be backyards. There used to be schools. At some point in time, a government authority has decided we need a road going right through there. And they got to acquire all the real estate in that path. So what that will do is they will approach the owners of that property and attempt to make an offer and buy it. Okay? Now, if you're not willing to sell, then they'll take it. Now, I say take it. They do have to pay you fair market value, but my point is they will take it whether you want to give it to them or not. So let me, in essence, tell you this. The right of government, if government determines that your property could best be used to serve the public, the right of government to take your property is called eminent domain. But look at the second sentence. Condemnation is the acting on that right. It is the actual legal process of taking your property. Now, when I was younger and I would hear condemned property, I thought of a building with a wrecking ball about to get torn down. Do y'all picture that when you hear condemned building? That's not what a condemned building is. It is, but that's not what a condemned building means by definition. It's just kind of like we've been told a tenant is a renter, but a tenant can be many things. That is a reason the government will condemn a building. Have you ever noticed downtowns? They've got a lot of tall, empty, old buildings. And sometimes the windows will get broke, the doors will get broke. And that's unsafe in a city because kids can break in, they want to go in there and smoke some hippie, build a fire. Bums want to come in there and live and build a fire if it's cold. Kids fall down elevator shafts. So that represents a risk. So they'll send a letter to the owner. The owner's usually out of state. And it's usually an entity, not an individual. And they'll say, listen, you've got to fix this. And you got to do it by this day. And if they don't do it by that day, guess what? The government will take ownership of your building. That is condemning it. It just so happens that it being unsafe and falling in on itself is one of the reasons they can condemn it. I can condemn it for a variety of reasons, not just because it's unsafe and falling in on itself. But the point I'm trying to arrive at before I can move forward is listen to how similar these questions are that could appear on your exam. What do you call the right of government to take an individual's property if it's been determined that person's property could best be used to serve the public? That's eminent domain. What do you call the legal process of taking someone's property when it's been determined that that person's property could best be used to serve the public? That's condemnation. But do you see how similar those questions sound? So the right of government is eminent domain. The acting on the right and actually taking the property is called condemnation. And guys, I'm telling you right now, I would bet you 90% of the students that are taking the state exam miss that question. I'll be damned. Eminent domain is the right of government. Condemnation is the actual process of taking it. And the example I used was, what if you saw a question that said, The right of government to take someone's property is called eminent domain. The process of taking someone's property, if it can be best be used to serve the public, is called condemnation. To punish my child is a parental right. The actual punishing is the whipping of the ass. And there's probably youngins in here that ain't never had their ass whipped. And I don't care if you're 30, you need it. You need it before you die. You need to get humble before you have children and perpetuate yourself. What is wrong? You sound like a drink before class. But y'all, on page 43, very interesting page. I'm certainly not going to sit here and read it to you, and I'm not going to explain it to you. It takes too long. But there was a very controversial eminent domain case that happened in 2005. I'll give you a summary of it. It was in Connecticut, I think. What does it say? I think it was Connecticut. Nevertheless, it was a residential community on the ocean. Wasn't fancy. They were all older homes, and they were mostly older people. But this little city was dying. And cities die just like me and you do. If there ain't enough businesses generating tax, that's what a city lives off of. So the city, as it was dying, they used the right of eminent domain to take all those people's homes, and they gave it to a private development company who was going to come in and put an office complex, office building, some shopping. So I don't know if you just heard what I said. They took it from one private individual and gave it to another private individual. When the government can determine that one individual is better than another because they got more money, that's when the government ain't doing right. And first of all, they've been doing that for a long damn time, but not in our face. This was in our face. Now, the examples I use, road, usually eminent domain in the past has been used for roads, hospitals, school, things that are good for all of us. Now, the city would have said, but we would have died. I'm going to die. Ain't nothing the matter with you dying too. If you want the property bad enough, City of New London, go make a damn offer on their property like me and you have to when we want to buy something. You can find summaries of it on YouTube. Very controversial, very interesting. Shook up politics a lot. But eminent domain. Let's turn the page over here to page 44. Escheat. I'll talk about escheat in another chapter. But if you die leaving no heirs, meaning no relatives, and no will, I'm on page 44, bottom of the page. If you die leaving no relatives, no heirs, no will, then the government gets your property through the right of escheat. We know what government's good at, so you shouldn't have a problem remembering that. Now, guys, at the end of every chapter, and some of you haven't been out of school long, so you kind of understand in academic textbooks. At the end of the textbook, it is not unusual to see a summary of the most important points. That's what they call a key point review. Then if you'll turn the page, you'll see a 20-question quiz. And this is an opportunity for you to see what you heard explained by a non-nerd in the nerd words that the people who write standardized exams. That connection has to take place in this 10 weeks, okay? Because you're going to discover, I understood exactly what Mark just said. Very interesting, but I'll be damned if I don't get the question wrong when I take it on a practice quiz. You have got, and this is a brain process. You have got to get comfortable associating your understanding of the concept with how the nerds are going to word it. So when we get to the end of a chapter, we have what we call our 15 minutes. I'm going to ask you to spend 2 or 3 minutes in the key point review, reinforcing what you just heard lectured. And then I want you to take the 20-question quiz. And guess where the answers to the quizzes are? In the back. Let me tell y'all a trick. I told y'all, gang, when I decided to become a teacher, the state don't require you train to be a teacher, but I wanted to train to learn how to teach. I wanted to make money at it. I wanted to be good at it. So in the process of training to become a teacher, I discovered, or I had validated how creepy the brain was. I knew the brain was creepy, but it's more creepy than I thought it was. So there's a method to the madness. That's where I'm aiming at. Again, there's hundreds of thousands of people in the country right now preparing for a licensing exam, just like you. Insurance, nurses, contractors, builders. And they'll do it. They'll take a 20 question, then they'll grade it. And, oh, I missed that one. What was I thinking? Oh, I missed that one. And I'll even have students come up, Mr. Yarber, I got 16 out of 20. I'm like, what do you want, a cookie? Guys, your goal is not to pass this quiz. This is a learning tool. Okay? So you can see how what you understand is worded by a nerd. Your concern is not to see how many you can get right. In fact, listen to this. It's called an imprint. I took the 1 through 20 and I missed 5. Those 5 wrong answers are imprinted on my brain. Even after I read the answer choice, oh, I see where I got it wrong. I don't know what I was thinking. Those 5 are imprinted. You ever moved your grandmother's couch that's been there for 35 years and there's 4 imprints on the corners? And I don't care how many times you clean that carpet and vacuum, them imprints ain't coming out. Here's how you avoid that wrong answer being imprinted on your brain. First of all, when you take the quiz, you're going to want to number a sheet of paper. You are not going to circle the answers in the quiz. We've already established that the mother of learning is repetition. And some of you may want to take a quiz 2 or 3 times. And scientists have determined it's difficult to take an exam objectively when the answers have been circled. So take it on a separate sheet of paper. Here's our method. I want to do this. I want to be taking it and be able to do the flip back. So I'm taking the quiz, and 1, that's easy. 2, that's easy. 3, that's easy. And then I come to 4, and I'm like, I don't even know. Do not guess. Because if you guess wrong, it's going to imprint the wrong answer in your brain. Flip, see what the answer is. Flip back and read that question 10 times and the answer to yourself 10 times, because this is a learning moment. I'm avoiding the imprint, and it's a learning moment. We're not taking the test to see how many we get right. We're taking it to learn the material. So you've got to do the flip back. We get about 3 weeks into the course, and I'll look around. I notice students aren't doing the flip back. I'm like, why don't you listen to people smarter than you? And I ain't smarter than anybody in this room. I take information from nerds that are smarter than all of us combined, and I pass it on to y'all. Remember to flip back. So right now, at 7:32, we're going to do our 15 minutes. Just spend a couple of quick minutes breezing through your key point review, reinforcing, pushing it back into the brain, and then take your 20-question quiz with the flip back. You may begin. And then we'll go into chapter 4 after that. Okay, I think I may be a minute short, but let's go ahead and dive into chapter 4. What I want you to understand is the 15 minutes is the time I usually see students will start texting people or rifling through their phone. And the irony is that's the most important points of the evenings. When we do the 15 minutes, that's our whole point of being here together, is to learn the material so we can pass the exam. But so by avoiding to do the 15 minutes and texting and stuff, it's ironical. It's the most important part of the evening. So chapter 4, page 49. Learning objectives, we're going to distinguish between owning and severalty and co-ownership. We're going to talk about the various forms of ways that you can co-own real estate with others. We'll describe trusts, partnerships, corporations, LLCs, and different types of properties that involve common interest. So let's turn the page. Now, every bit of this, guys, is a result of disputes that have come before the courts over the last 240 years. This book didn't have a page in it 240 years ago. There's an alpha and an omega. So when our courts were in the beginning, they were hearing disputes for the first time. And if there were real estate related disputes, they would arrive at justice and then record the dispute and record what their solution was. So if they had a similar dispute, they could be consistent with the application of law and refer to the previous one. And as you would imagine, there's arguments between people who co-own real estate together. You can co-own property with siblings. Maybe a parent died and left it to you. You can co-own property with a spouse. You can co-own property with other investors that may also be your friends, but you buy property for the purpose of investing. So the law over the years has had to, because of all the varieties of disputes, form all the legalities around co-owning property with others. Now, while there are multiple ways you can co-own property with others, there's two primary ways. I say primary. Two more common than others ways. And I'll put them on the board so you can see the similarities and also see the differences. So you see in the middle of page 50, tenancy in common. Oops, I don't want to do that. I want to put tenancy in common on this side. And you look at the bottom of page 51, you see joint tenancy. So I'm putting them side by side so you can see how they are similar and where they're different. Again, there's more than these two ways to co-own property with others. These just happen to be the most popular, the most common ways people co-own property with others. So that's the ones we're going to start with. Now, there must be 4 elements that exist in a joint tenancy for it to be legitimate. The key distinction that separates the two is right of survivorship. I'll describe all of this to you if you let me have a second to write some stuff down. Now, I'm going to let you write that on the board if you happen to be taking notes so I can click back to my picture. T-tip is what these are. T-T-I-P. T-tip. So, more often than not, joint tenancy is a family situation, not by rule, not by law, just the likelihood. More often than not, tenancy in common are investors. But again, it could be the opposite. Investors can take title as joint tenancy, and family can take title as tenancy in common. I'm just saying the likelihood. Because I'll use an example. My father passes and leaves me and my 3 sisters property. So I look at my sisters and I say, girls, we're going to take title to this property as joint tenants. They say, well, you know the real estate, brother. We don't. Because in some instances of co-ownership, I want to have some control over what the other co-owners can do with their interests. So again, sticking with my example, me and my 3 sisters are going to take title to the property as joint tenants. I don't want to be able to prevent them from selling their interest if they need to, because we all get in a pinch here and there. But I do want to be able to prevent them from dying and leaving it to somebody. So in a joint tenancy, first of all, let's understand that all owners come about at the same time. And I use an example, me and my 3 sisters at probate, receiving title from my father. All 4 of us at the same time. It's a little easier to add and subtract owners as tenants in common. See, tenants in common, let's say me and my three sisters own property as tenants in common. I can't prevent them from doing anything. They can sell their interest. They can die and leave it to somebody in a will. So here you can sell or will. Here you can only sell. As a joint tenant, I can only sell. As a tenant in common, I can sell or will it. But one critical thing, all owners come about at the same time. The next T stands for title. And what it's referring to is the fact that in a joint tenancy, there's only one deed. And on that deed, there are a list of all the joint tenants. Whereas here, as tenants in common, there are as many deeds as there are owners. So if there are 4 co-owners, then they all 4 have a deed. As many deeds as owners. Only one deed here. The I stands for interest, and every joint tenant has an equal divided interest. No joint tenant will have more than the other. So everybody has an equal interest, where you can have equal interest as a tenant in common, but it's possible to have unequal interest. I could own property with Jimmy and Tim. I got a 20% interest. Tim got a 46% interest. Jimmy got a 34% interest. Unequal. Whereas if we were joint tenants, 33 and 30, 33 and 30, 33 and 30. Always equal. Now, like I said, you can have equal here. It's just possible to have unequal. And then the last of the T-tip, T-T-I-P. The P stands for possession. And of the 4 letters, T-tip, this is the only one that's true on both sides of the line. Regardless, if there were a unique situation, y'all, if there were a unique situation to where multiple co-owners actually resided in the property that they co-own, everybody would have a right to use the whole house. You couldn't get masking tape and start dividing every room. You know, Tom, you get on your damn 17% of the living room. You know, that's ridiculous. And frankly, it's not the physical structure that's divvied up in an ownership situation. It's the income dynamics that's divvied up. Now, the right of survivorship. Let's show you what this means. Picture me and my 3 sisters standing in front of you. And we're all 4, me and my 3 sisters, all 4 of us holding a glass that is 25% full of water, the water being symbolic of our interest in the property. One of my sisters passes away. We would take her rights and they would flow evenly to the remaining survivors. Number 33 and 30, 33 and 30, 33 and 30. One of my other sisters passes away. Taking a selfie in the Grand Canyon. We take her rights, they flow to the remaining survivors. Now we're 50-50. My last sister passes, boom, I'm holding a full glass of water. Look up at the top of page 50. Ownership in severalty, highlight the word severalty, occurs when property is owned by one individual, one corporation, or another one type of entity. Meaning one owner, period. Now, students come up to me, they say, Mr. Yarb, I'm confused. Severalty sounds like comes from the word several, but you're talking about one. We're all confused by this. Trust me. Severalty means one because it doesn't derive from the word several. It derives from the word severed. Meaning, I may have co-owned this property with others in the past. I don't now. My interests have been cut off or severed from anybody else. I stand on this island alone. So ownership and severalty means one. So we just discussed tenancy in common and joint tenancy, the two primary ways, the two most common ways, rather, that you could go on property with others. And, you know, even though you're brand new at this, I have a feeling you have a reasonable grasp on what I just talked about, you know. But you know how when you take questions on the test, they don't give it to you vanilla. They always got to put a damn wrinkle on it. You know what I mean? A twist. So let me help you with a twist on this question. Let's say me and my three sisters, the four of us, own property that Pops died and left us. Here it is Easter. We're over at Mama's for potluck. We get through eating. My sister April says, y'all meet me back in Mama's guest room. She said that to me and my other two sisters. So all us kids in the back. And she goes, y'all, I didn't want Mama to hear this. She said, y'all, I just found out Ricky, her husband, Ricky has been online gambling for the last number of years, and I've been unaware of it. He has officially lost everything we own. Our house, our car, money, everything. And we're immediately, like you would be, sis, damn, can we do anything for you? She goes, y'all, I didn't bring y'all back here for sympathy. Yeah, I got a backbone. I can stand on my own damn 2 feet. Stuff happens, and it happened to me this time. I'm just wanting to know if y'all can buy me out, buy my 25% out. That'll give me a little seed money. I can get rolling again. And we're like, oh, sis, you know, we've been taking a beating. You know, I mean, my wife, she lost her job. We ain't got no cash. We want to help you, sis. We'll give you refuge in our house if you need it. But we ain't got no money. We can't buy you out. And she goes, oh, holy crap. I thought all I have to do is take y'all back here and tell y'all, and y'all cut me a check. She goes, I'm in a pickle, y'all. She goes, do y'all mind if I sell to Terry? And maybe Terry is a friend of ours, family friend. She sings in the choir at the church. She's good people. And we say, we're sorry we can't help you, sis. But if you need to sell to Terry to get you out of this situation, we're okay with that. Now, in this situation, there are 3 joint tenants and 1 tenant in common. Who is the tenant in common? Terry. Why is Terry the tenant in common?
She's not family. She's not related. She's just a friend.
That's very sharp of you. Because he can't see the arrow I drew. But yeah, they came in at a different time. All gotta come. I didn't put these bullets up here for the hell of it. All gotta come about the same time. Now, can Terry will it to anybody she wants to? Yeah, remember we said you can sell and will. You can only sell here. Now, in the example I used with Easter, my sister took us back in the room and asked me, because she's family, she didn't need our damn permission. If she wanted to go sell it to Terry without us, she could have. We couldn't have prevented that. She's just being family, you know. She's telling us in the back room. She's being respectful. But she didn't need our permission. Just remember, you could only sell right here, but you can sell or will. Now, Terry can will. And we might not like that, me and my other 2 sisters. So we get Terry in the car, and we go down to an attorney. We grab a bite to eat, and we form a new joint tenancy that includes Terry. We're not absorbing her. That would be adding and subtracting. We're just forming a new one, happens to include her, but it happened at the same time. But, you know, like I say, they're going to ask you questions. They're not going to give it to you like you learned it. They're going to put a twist on it. See if you can think your way through the wrinkle. So from what I hear from students, now I take scenarios that students tell me on it, and I country them up a little bit, but I stick to the scenario that they're telling me. So anticipate a scenario where you've got multiple joint tenants. They sell to somebody else, and they're going to want to know, do you know that they're a tenant in common? Because they didn't come about at the same time. Okay. So let's move on. Oh, listen to this. This may help you understand joint tenancy a little better. They used to call, and you can write it around joint tenancy, bottom of page 51. They used to call joint tenancy a poor man's will. I'm going to explain why. Let's say I got a small family, wife, couple of youngins, but we ain't got a whole lot. Ain't got a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out of. And I'm talking to my pops one day, and my pop says, "You got a will, boy?" And I said, "No, Dad, I ain't got no will." And he goes, "You need a will. You got a family now. You need to act all adult like." And I'm embarrassed to tell my dad I ain't got no money. So I'm thinking, man, he's right though. Me and my wife could take title to the property as joint tenants, or let's say I want it to go to my son. Me and my son could take title to the property as joint tenancy so that when I die, who gets the property? My son. And it happened without me having to pay an attorney to draw up a will. So I take ownership of real estate in a way that creates that without me having to pay an attorney to draw up a will. So I don't know, maybe when you read Poor Man's Will outside of class, that'll maybe give you a little jog your memory. Let's bottom of page 53. Partition suit, highlight that. Like I said a minute ago, y'all, it's not unusual for there to be co-owners of real estate, and you can't get them all on the same page as far as what to do with the property. It could be an investment property. Maybe me and three of my boys, we got a little partnership. We own this office building, 40,000 square feet building. One of my friends wants to tear it down and build a new modern one. I just want to put a new blacktop on the parking lot and put a facade and paint it, dress it up a little bit. One of my friends wants to refinance it, put all the cash out, and let's go buy something else. It's very common for there to be differences. So any co-owner, I don't care if they're a tenant common or a joint tenant, any co-owner in such a situation can file a partition suit with the courts. Guys, lean on your vocabulary. What's the word partition mean? Separate, divide, right? So the judge is basically, you're asking the courts to be a mediator. The judge will hear y'all. He'll try to work with you like parents trying to get two squabbling kids to get along. But if he can't get y'all on the same page, he's going to say, "To hell with y'all, I'm going to force to sell the property. Each of you take your share, argument's over." That's usually what the courts is going to say if he can't get you on the same page. But lean on your vocabulary. Sometimes you can lean on your vocabulary in this course. Sometimes you can't. But partition suit. Turning the page. So it's break time. Lord, my timing's off. Let's do a break until 8:18. It gives you a 13-minute break. We'll see y'all back here in just a minute.
Mr. Martin, make sure you draw my name for the free crown exam.
I will have some contests throughout y'all's semester. If you pay attention to Facebook, I'll put it on the Facebook page of the company. I'll be drinking one night. I'll say, which one is Mark's favorite song? A, B, C, or D? And then I'll notify you within 48 hours of who won the free course. Like I give away the 30-hour post-license course when I get to drink and have my music contest. All right, here we go, gang. Satellite students, hopefully you're back from break. And we're going to pick up where we left off, page 54. Ownership by married couples. This is co-ownership. So, you see Tennessee by the entirety. First of all, highlight those 4 words and put a 1 beside it to the left of it. And then come down and highlight community property and put a 2 beside it to the left. There are 2 ways some states require couples to take title to property. Alabama doesn't do either. But there are some states that are community property states. There are some states that are Tennessee by the entirety states. Alabama's neither. The woman gets it all in Alabama. I was just joking. But here we go. Let's talk about community property first. California is a community property state. Let's say me and old girl dating. She brings into our marriage 3 properties. I bring into our marriage 2 properties. The I-do's are said. We become a couple, and we begin acquiring property. At the time of our divorce, and I don't know if any of you have experienced a divorce, or the judge puts all the assets in a pile and starts distributing. You get a little of this, you get a little of that. You get a little of this, you get a little of that. Well, when he puts all the assets at the time of the divorce in a pile, whatever she brought into the marriage, the judge is going to cut and separate from the pile he's going to divvy up. Hence the term, look under community property, the paragraph, separate property. See the separate property. The judge is going to cut what she brought in and separate it from the pile. He's going to cut what I brought in, separate it from the pile, and whatever's left is 50-50. Community property. Who in here has seen Eddie Murphy's Raw? Stand up. About 5 of you. Man. Do y'all remember when he's talking about marrying the African woman? What have you done for me lately, Eddie? I want half. You remember him saying half? California is a community property state. He was referencing community property when he said half. You young kids, man, it's good. Eddie Murphy Raw. Community property. So now there's an exception to what I just said. There could be an instance where I or my wife bring property into the marriage during the marriage, but it would be called separate property at our divorce. And that would be if my wife or I receive property by inheritance or gift. Like if my mama and daddy give me a property, my old lady ain't got no right to that at the divorce, and vice versa, okay? Tennessee by the entirety. Let's call community property Coke. Tennessee by the entirety Pepsi. It's the 2 most common ways that some states require you to take a title if you're married. Tennessee by the entirety just says this. Me and my spouse are 50-50. I'm guaranteed her half. She's guaranteed my half. No questions asked. She can't do nothing with my half without me knowing it, and vice versa. And if you'll notice 5 lines down from where you highlighted Tennessee by the entirety, I want you to highlight have the right of survivorship. Because if I'm guaranteed her half when she dies and she's guaranteed my half, that's right of survivorship. But I could do nothing without her, with her half, without her signature. Again, vice versa. So now we're on to page 55. I have had people ask me, like I'm an attorney, Mark, I've had my children ask, why would people choose an LLC over a corporation, over a partnership? There's a lot of different answers. Usually two reasons: the risk involved with the business and the tax situations of the people involved. And guys, we're all like snowflakes. We're all in different tax situations. You know, your peak earning years are between 45 and 55. And that's when I want to seek tax relief. My peak earning years are not in my 20s. So saving money on taxes is not that big of a concern usually. And when I get 70, usually I'm retired and I don't have a lot of income. So again, whatever your tax or the tax situation of the people and the risk involved. So we'll start out by talking about a trust. Y'all remember when Hilton girl, Paris Hilton, was the flavor of the month? I see her back on damn TV. I don't know why. But I remember, watching all them Hollywood people party. I thought, she ain't blown that Hilton money yet. She can't blow it. It's in a trust. If I were to accumulate vast wealth, I damn sure wouldn't just leave it to my kids. Because they would. They'd blow it. If you gave me a few $1 million at 20 years old, I'll be dead in 6 months with a smile on my face. So I understand it as a parent. Empathetically, I get it. So I ain't going to make my kids, I ain't going to put them in that situation. I'm going to put it in a trust. And there will be people who benefit from the trust, hence the term beneficiaries. But they'll benefit how I want them to benefit. Because let's say in the trust, let's say I'm wealthy and I put all my assets in a trust. A lot of assets generate income. Stocks earn dividends and interest, and real estate earns money. So I can decide how the income generated from the assets will be divvied out. I could even put conditions. My kid will not benefit from my trust unless she remains gainfully employed. That's to keep my spoiled kids working, keep them real. Well, we become assholes as parents, don't we? Y'all gonna hurt. So trust. Let's turn the page. Now at the top of page 56, living trust. This is mainly a tax avoidance. There's called an estate tax. Sometimes people call it a death tax. So when I pass, a portion of my assets go to the government. That's not fair. They taxed it when I earned it. They taxed it when I profited from my investments, even though I took the risk, and now they're going to take a piece of my action after I die. So you can set up a living trust, and it's an avoidance. It is. But really, the next page 57, is where we're going to get down to the nitty gritty. But I do want to talk about land trusts. Again, what if I'm a wealthy man? I got a lot of real estate, and sometimes when you own vast amounts of real estate, it's just raw, naked land. And sometimes there's creeks and canyons and just property that's unusable, not developable. Why would I want to pay taxes on that? Property taxes. So a lot of people will take unusable land and set up in a land trust. And sometimes the older you get, the more economic, earth-friendly you get. And you think, I'm going to take all my land and prevent it from being developed in the future. I'm going to let it remain raw nature. And I set it up into a land trust. Highlight the last sentence of the paragraph under land trusts. It reads, land trusts are frequently created for the conservation of farmland, forests, other wildlife habitats, coastal lands, scenic vistas. So over here in 57, more than likely, this is what you're going to have appear on the exam. So partnership versus corporations versus LLCs. I'll start with a partnership. Let's say I live in a small town. And at the Huddle House one morning, I meet Mr. Abernathy for breakfast, and he owns the little grocery store, and he's owned it my whole life. Owned it for 50 years. It's about as big as a Piggly Wiggly, but it's the only one in town. It does very well. And unfortunately, Mr. Abernathy has outlived his children. So he didn't have anybody to live it to, and he's ready to retire. So he's selling it. That's why I'm meeting him at the Huddle House. He brings his profit and loss statement, his accounting, and I look at how the business is being ran, and we discuss sales price, etc. You know, isn't it better to buy a 50-year-old business that's been successful than try to come up with a new one? Absolutely. So, you know, it's a reasonable price. So I go to my three buddies, the four of us, we get involved in stuff. You know, we friends, we drink beer and invest. So I say, you know, hey, Mr. Abernathy he's retired, selling his grocery store, and he wants this for it. I think it's doable. I looked at the accounting. I think it's a score. Y'all want to get involved? They say, Mark, you're the real estate guy in our gang. If you trust it, we trust it. And I say, well, he is selling it for X dollars, but he is willing to take about $300,000 down. He'll finance the balance in a 10-year balloon. And they go, wow. So I say, I'm going to need a $100,000 check from all three of them. Notice who ain't putting up any money. In this instance, I'm going to be the general partner. They're going to be the limited partners. The general partner runs the business. The limited partners only contribute the money or capital necessary for the business to run. Guys, it's a real parallel to stocks. If I buy one share of Coca-Cola, I can call myself an owner of Coca-Cola. Now, my ownership position is tiny. I didn't know that in my mid-20s. I heard somebody say, you know, talking about being an owner, and I was like, they explained. They said, yeah, shares of stock is ownership. I bought one share of stock for my daughter for Christmas, a share of Disney. It cost $267. And that was 20 years ago. So next ball game party I was at, I heard somebody say, man, did you see that 101 Dalmatians? That was a good movie. I went, thank you. We worked hard on that. But anyway, when I buy 100 shares of Coca-Cola, does that mean I can start showing up at the board meetings and going, let's try a blue can for 6 months? You never know. No, they'll call security on me. When you buy a stock, I have no input as to how the business is ran. I just watch the stock reports and hope to God they do a good job, and hope to God the CEO for Coca-Cola doesn't get caught diddling kids. Because if he does, my stock going to plummet, and I didn't have a damn thing to do with it. But that's stock. That's very similar to a limited partnership. Limited partners are also called silent partners. You ever heard that? Now, I had a girl telling me, oh, my dad is a silent partner. I said, that doesn't mean it's a secret. Silent means shut up. We just want your money. You have no input as to how the business is ran. The general partner runs the business. The limited partners just contribute the money. Well, why do they call it a limited partner, Mr. Yarber? Well, let's say the grocery store is doing good, and one day, Tuesday, a little boy is on the peanut butter aisle and he's trying to reach the Skippy on the top row. He climbs the bottom two rows. Next thing, he pulls the whole damn aisle on him, kills him. The family sues us, wins a judgment for $3.4 million. I have an auditor come in, an accountant, and they determine my store and all the equipment is only worth about $2.2 million. All the limited partners lose is what they have currently invested. Their risk in such an instance is limited to what they already have currently invested. Who takes the rest of the risk, Mr. The damn general partners? They assume the greater risk. They get the benefit of not having to contribute to working capital, but they assume the risk. Isn't life give and take? If you want this, you give this up. You want this, you give this up, you know? So that's a partnership. Corporation, it's double taxation to me. Corporation, why do you want a corporation? Well, okay, let's put a twist on it. Let's say me and my three buddies, we take ownership, we form a corporation, and we get sued. Do you know if you do not have an LLC or a corporation, if the corporate assets cannot satisfy the judgment, they can go after the proprietor's personal assets. They can take your home, your car, your 401k, your savings account, everything. And I think everybody in here, if you were on a business, you would want your personal assets protected from any exposure from your business. So that's what a corporation does. A corporation puts a shield around the officers of the corporation's personal assets, shielding them from such litigation. But you got to pay a very high corporate tax rate. It's been illogical in my mind why the United States has such a high corporate tax rate. It's why over the last 20 years we've lost all our industry to China and Mexico and India. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not a blue or a red. I don't play that damn game. And I got out of that game a long time ago. And I hope you don't play that game. But, logical and illogical doesn't have a color to it. So I don't know why we pay the highest corporate tax rate. But that's the corporation. The primary focus of the corporation is to put a fence around the personal assets of the corporation, of the assets of the officers. An LLC. Okay, let me give you a visual. Here is the corporation, and this is the front door. When the money comes in the corporation, as it crosses the threshold, it gets hit with the corporate tax. This is before income taxes are paid. Now, once it enters, you got to pay income tax. Hence the double taxation. Whereas if this were an LLC, it gets to walk in the door and doesn't get hit when it walks in the door with the corporate tax rate. When the income enters the company, all of the owners in the LLC, their tax rate is merely their ordinary income tax rate. So I have had students tell me there are 2 questions on LLCs on the exam. Let's get those out of the way. One very simple question says, what does the C stand for in LLC? Not corporation, company. And then I've had students tell me, they say, what is the nickname for an LLC? The answer is, it is a pass-through entity. Now, I'm going to use the text version of through, but it's called the tax, because the income passes through the front door without getting hit with the corporate tax rate. So it's a pass-through entity. So those are the 2 questions I'm hearing from students. The nickname for an LLC is a pass-through entity. And the C, what does the C stand for? It stands for company, not corporation. And then we turn to page 58. I'm almost done with y'all. That's what she said. On page 58, let's talk a little bit about condominiums. Highlight the second sentence because I've heard that is on the exam. Condominium laws are often called horizontal property acts. I have no idea why. But let's talk about a condominium. You can live in an apartment and enjoy the conveniences of living in an apartment. What are the conveniences? I ain't got to fix nothing. Or all I got to do is make a call. So I don't have the expense. I don't have the responsibility of lining it up. I just let the property manager know. That's a beautiful thing. I usually got a swimming pool and tennis courts, things that most homeowners can't afford. So there are many legitimate reasons to rent. But you know what? Everything's give and take. I'm giving up the building of equity, and I'm giving up the tax advantages of home ownership. Same thing with home ownership. I've got the expense and the responsibility. I don't have the convenience of apartment living, but I'm building equity. I got the tax advantages. So sometimes people try to have their cake and eat it too. And that's what a condominium is. Most of America didn't recognize the legal form of condominium ownership until the early 70s. I think it was 1973 in Alabama. I had to know that. They don't test anymore. The only reason I can still recall that is I had to know that on my exam. But let's say I'm driving down the road. First of all, you don't buy a condo. That's just slang. You buy a unit. Condominium is the legal form of ownership. But let's say I'm driving down the road, heading to my condo. I just bought a condo in a 100 condo complex. So I'm driving down the road. Here comes my complex up. So I put the blinker on. I pull in. All right. I put her in park. I get out. And everything I can see, touch, and feel, I own 1/100th of. Why? Because there's 100 units. I own one. I own what you ever hear them call them common areas? Because I own with tenant in common with all the other owners. I don't even own the exterior of my door. I own 1/100th of the exterior of my door. Now, when I put the key in, open it, I own the interior of my unit in fee simple. But I own the exterior as a tenant in common with the other owners. That's the only thing I can tell you about condos, really. I don't know a whole lot about them, you know. Do you have an expense in repairs? Yeah, but you pay monthly association. They go into a pot, and the association handles the repairs and all from that. But the main thing we want to know is the horizontal property tax. I hear that's on there. So here we go. Turn to page 60. Cooperative ownership. First of all, guys, if you want to see other versions of this being taught, what you're going to do is put the title of the chapter in the search bar on YouTube. So if you wanted to see anything and everything on YouTube that has to do with this subject, all you got to do is put forms. I would even put Unit 4. Unit 4, forms of real estate ownership. And you'll see 15-minute little PowerPoint summaries. You'll see 3-hour you'll see a bunch of them. But the cooperative form of ownership came about 100 years ago during the Depression. And interestingly enough, it was a way for poor people to collectivize and be able to buy real estate. The irony is over time, it has become a way for well-to-do people, especially uber wealthy. You don't have to be uber wealthy, just high income. But the uber wealthy tend to only want to live amongst uber wealthy. I get that. I don't envy them or resent them for that. Can you imagine being Oprah and every morning going to Starbucks, you got to take 20 damn pictures with fans and autographs? It would get old. So you kind of want to be able to just walk around your own digs without having to put up with that. So, like I remember being on first time I went to Chicago, I went on a little boat tour. And the guy said, there's Oprah's apartment. We were like, which one? He said, the top 3 floors of that skyscraper. It was a co-op. So the building, and guys, apartments in New York City and Chicago and stuff, they're not apartments that we think of, But let's say New York City, the building itself is a corporation. And if you want to live there, you've got to meet with a board of homeowners, of owners in the building. And they got to determine, are you uber enough to live amongst them? And if they do, then they will give you they will allow you to purchase shares of stock in the corporation. And in exchange for your shares of stock, right in the middle of cooperative ownership, I want you to highlight 4 words: receives a proprietary lease. Guys, does anybody in my room know what the word proprietor means? Not one damn person. I'm not making fun of y'all. I just thought statistically. Owner. So if I'm standing in the middle of a hardware store saying I'm the proprietor, I own the joint.
This is a proprietary lease. It's a,
Middle of page 60, we're talking about cooperative, so we're talking about cooperative ownership. In the middle of that paragraph, you'll see 4 words. It says receives a proprietary lease. So regardless, when you purchase a share of stock, what do you become of that company? An owner. So by virtue of my ownership of stock in the apartment building, I receive permission to occupy a unit that's called a proprietary lease. In other words, you're an owner, Mr. Yarber, so we're going to let you occupy a particular unit. We're going to call that a proprietary lease. Some of these things I'm going to ask you to marry together, because if you see cooperative on a question, the answer is going to be proprietary lease. If you see proprietary lease in the question, the answer is probably going to be cooperative. Okay, some of these will marry and vice versa. Over here on page 61. We're at our 15 minutes. So you may begin, spend 2 or 3 minutes in the key point review, reinforcing what we just discussed. Then flip over to the 20-question quiz and do the flip back to avoid the imprints. I see what time it is. I know when we'll be done.
I didn't find.
Did you look on the internet?
I started to, but I didn't know if the internet was on.
I got some stuff on the internet.
I started to. And that was, okay.
All right, we've got our 15 minutes handle. Guys, real estate's a beautiful career. I think you've made some determinations. That's why you're here. You know, you always hear corny things. You should do what you love. Have you heard that? Who gets that lucky? You can do that in real estate. It's easy to love. I remember being a young man and struggling to find a good woman. I was talking to my grandfather, and he said, look for a woman like your mother. I thought that makes sense. I did. Only problem is my father hated her. But hey, guys, anticipate your email Friday. They're chock full of value. Your syllabus, don't lose it. We've got a lot of study suggestions on your syllabus. We'll see y'all next week. We're actually doing 3 chapters Tuesday night. We're doing chapters 5, 6, and 7. We have a portal on our website. We've just developed it. I don't want to speak ahead of turn, but I would imagine an email will come to you giving you access to the portal, so that way you can download any forms we have. You can view any of the recorded sessions after the fact if you'd like to see them for repetition. I don't want to speak out of turn. I'll have to get with Ashley and see if that's ready yet, but it's almost there if it's not already. Nevertheless, just stay in touch with us. Stay focused. Why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? And we'll see you Tuesday night. Have a safe trip home. Good week.